Hi, this is Lynn from Lily's Quilt Shop in Clifton Forge, Virginia. Today we're talking about Cup of Cheer by Kimberbell. The 31st of August, the 1st and 2nd of September, we will be having a class and quilting this quilt. And I wanted to show you today a little bit what it looks like. This is the book that you will receive along with your CD. And the book is very well written. It tells you all of the supplies that you need, including all of your fabrics, what size the fabric needs to be, what block it goes for, what quilt section it is in, and then what each block size will have to be. So if you wanted to pre-cut everything before you started quilting this quilt, you could do so. There's also a handy fabric cutting guide that shows you how to lay out your fabric and cut each block that is needed. Next, the book talks about the embellishments. So when you take the class, you will receive this embellishment kit, which has everything you need to finish the quilt. As you can see, there are lots of pieces of felt, and there are zippers, buttons and bells, and everything that it takes to finish this quilt for you. This book also talks about stabilizers and the different backings and battings and things that you may need. And then you begin your quilt block instructions. Now each quilt block tells you what background fabric, what size it needs to be, and then for your star, which today we're doing this first star here, block number 1, star number 1, and it needed to be 6 by 6. Now it also tells you that you need to iron fusible backing on the wrong side of the background fabric. So this is our background fabric, and I have ironed the fusible backing onto the back of it. So that piece is 8.5 by 8.5, and then my star, this is my fabric for the star, this piece is 6 by 6. I've also cut a piece of project batting, which almost any batting will do. It just depends on how thick you want your finished quilt to be. But I've cut this just a little bit smaller than my background fabric so that I know it will fit onto the frame. So next, I'm going to use my block by block quilting instructions. I have loaded into my machine already the quilt and the embroidery file so that they can both be done at the same time. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to quilt that first star block that I just showed you. The first thing the machine is going to do is it's going to stitch a placement line so that we know where to lay our project batting down. Now today I'm working on a Bernina 790 Plus with a 6 by 10 hoop. The hoop is slightly smaller than what is needed for placement lines, but that's fine. We will just keep stitching around. Okay, hit the Okay, so now that I have my placement line, I'm going to lay down my project batting, making sure that I have covered the placement lines that the machine has sewn for me. And then I'm going to allow the machine to tack down my batting. Now the machine is going to go around the batting twice to make sure that it's tacked down well, and then I will trim it. Now, also included in the class, we will also have a bag that you can put all of your little embellishments in that stick onto this advent quilt, and you'll have something to keep them in when you're not using your quilt. The quilt also comes with several options. There's a very cute block that you can see down here at the bottom that has the station wagon. They also have the option for you to put a Volkswagen in, depending on which memory you have from when you were a child, or whatever your preference is. Now that the machine has finished tacking down our batting, I'm going to trim the batting so that we can lay our fabric down and let the machine do. We will be doing our quilting. So you just trim the batting as close as you can to the sew lines. And if you hold the batting up just a little bit, it gives you a little bit of extra tension, making it a little bit easier to cut. Now I like to use these curved scissors because they allow you to go around the edge of the hoop a little bit easier. So next the machine is going to stitch a placement line. Now the machine has finished quilting our placement line, I'm going to place our fabric, which has the fusible backing on it, into the hoop so that it can tack down my fabric, and then it will do the quilting. Now in this class, if you decide to take it with us, you will also be provided with all of the fabric that you need to complete your quilt. This quilt can be completed in a 5x7 hoop. It just takes a couple of hoopings, or you can use a much larger hoop if you prefer. I like the larger hoops just because it makes it easier. Now that the machine has tacked down my fabric, it is ready to quilt. So I'm going to run my quilting stitch. The nice thing about Kimberbell is they have provided coordinating quilting stitches to go with this particular quilt. The one that we are quilting today is little stockings on lines. You can see that the end of the book gives you finishing and embellishments where everything goes, so that they give you a good idea as to how to put it together. Of course, you can always put it together to suit yourself, but they have divided it into sections, and then they show you how to place all of your blocks together. There are also instructions for doing your outer borders, and then it comes to the instructions to do your embellishments. So we have holly leaves, and we have wreath leaves, and tags, and all sorts of additional embellishments that you can use on this Advent quilt that will produce this beautiful finished product. The nice thing is that when you quilt block by block, it will be completely quilted and ready to be sewn together once you are finished. Now you can see that the machine has finished our quilting, and we are ready to start placing our applique fabric. So we've done our block by block quilting. Now we are ready to do our embroidery instructions. So I am going to load the green onto my, because we're using this green, and we're going to stitch our star placement line. Now the instructions do tell me that the fabric needs to be right side up when I place my fabric. So we simply change our thread here, and you can use any green that you feel matches with the fabric. It's So the first thing I'm going to do is allow the machine to stitch my placement line. I did use a neutral color thread for my quilting because I didn't want it to show up a great deal. I'm going to take the hoop out of the machine so that you can see it. It's not necessary at this point, but as you can see, it has stitched our placement line for exactly where I need to place my fabric. So I'm going to take my fabric and I'm going to place it right side up and making sure that it is covering all of the placement lines that the machine has just stitched. Now I'm going to allow the machine to stitch down my fabric. As you can see, the machine is going around the fabric twice to make sure that it's tacked down and also to make it harder for me to cut it to where it will be out of place again. You do not want to stitch or to cut your tack down lines. Now that the machine has tacked my fabric down, I'm going to take my scissors, and again, these are my favorite, the little curved scissors, because you can get down into the hoop very easily. And you simply kind of hold your fabric up a little bit to give it a little bit of tension so you can cut, because you want to cut as close to the stitches as you can without actually cutting the stitches, because you do want the fabric to remain attached to your base fabric. So we're quickly going to go around the star. A lot of the fabric used in this quilt is from Mayweather Studios. It's a beautiful Christmas line called Cup of Cheer. And hence the name of the quilt, Cup of Cheer Quilt. This little Advent quilt would be a wonderful thing to make if you have grandchildren, or if you have young children, or if, like me, I have grown children and grandchildren, but I love Christmas and I love Advent blocks. Okay, so now that I have this completely cut out, and you can see I've cut as close to the stitch lines as I can without cutting the fabric, I'm now going to run my finishing stitches so that the block will be finished. Now that the machine is just about finished running all of my finishing stitches, as you can see they look like little stars. They're beautiful finishing stitches. Our star looks complete. So this is our first block in the quilt called Cup of Cheer. This is an Advent quilt, so it will have everything from the first day of December through the 25th. There's lots of little embellishments that you can put on it, and you can also add candies or little notes or whatever you prefer. So you can see this is block number 1 on our Cup of Cheer Advent quilt that has been completely finished. All I have left to do now is take it out of the hoop, and I will cut it to the finished size that it needs to be so that when I'm done, all of my blocks can be sewn into this Cup of Cheer quilt. Thank you for coming and watching us with Lunch with Lynne, and this is Lolly's Quilt Shop in Clifton Forge, Virginia. Thank you so much.